Nocturne by Frédéric Chopin. Now there is something that can be learned from the title of this composition itself. If you take a look at the word nocturne and ignore the final E, it looks very much like the beginning of the English word nocturnal. In fact, nocturne means night music in French, and it is a work that purports to capture the sentiments of the night. Now, we don't think very much about night these days. We can dispel night and the darkness with a flip of the switch. But imagine yourself as living 150 years ago, during a time when most people could not afford to light their homes at night. And so for them, night was a force with which they had to reckon. Basically, the fall of night meant the end of the day for people back then. So night was far more important to people in the past and more on their minds than it is today. In terms of genre, a nocturne is a specific type of character pieces. There are many specific types of character pieces that have their own sub-generic designation like this here. Nocturne is just one of them. And a nocturne, a work that purports to capture the sentiments of the night, was a very popular type of character piece during the 19th century, and in fact composers are still writing them today. In fact, the nocturne was a genre written by many composers, not just by Chopin, although you might get that idea if you were to listen to one of these so-called classical music stations. Almost every nocturne that you would hear would be by that composer. If you were a piano student or were to know someone who takes piano lessons, chances are almost every nocturne you would hear would be written by Chopin. This, however, is an incomplete picture of this genre. Hundreds of composers of the 19th century wrote such compositions, and as I've said earlier, composers are still writing them today. When you hear this work by Chopin, you will be hearing a work that was written for domestic use. Although pianists today play such works in concert, and in fact the Chopin nocturnes are seen to be the touchstone of the accomplished pianist, such works were composed by Chopin and other composers for musical amateurs. That is, for people who would play them for their own amusement or the amusement of their friends and family in their own homes. Now, it's quite clear that these musical amateurs were highly accomplished musicians, because some of these works are fiendishly difficult. And this work gives you a little bit of an insight into how much skill is required to play such a composition. The work starts out very slowly and quietly, but if you listen to it carefully, you will hear many short, fast notes in rapid succession. These passages sound very easy to play, but in fact they require an extreme amount of control to execute. And of course, the central part of this composition has lots of short, fast notes in it, and there it's very obvious that this kind of music, written for musical amateurs, is not necessarily easy to play. Indeed, there is no necessary difference in skill between musical amateurs and musical professionals, and this is a very good example of it. So whenever I use the term music for amateurs, I'm simply referring to music for domestic use, as is the case with character pieces, such as this one by Chopin.